Hi, this is Robert Poletic, the owner of Brutal Iron Gym. In today's video, I wanted to share 3 tips on how I structured my workout today that might help your workouts. So tip number 1 is I actually trained my back 2 days in a row. So I just trained my back yesterday and I'm training it again today. This is a technique I'll use to get a boost on a muscle that I feel might be lagging. I'll just train it on back-to-back days. I'll usually do that for a couple weeks in a row, maybe like 4 to 8 weeks, so 1 to 2 months worth of programming. And I like that because it gives a little bit of an extra boost and extra emphasis on that muscle group. Usually the first day I'll do more compound movements, the heavier of typical exercise selection. And then the second day I'll do more isolative, lighter movements. Since I'm already a little pre-fatigued, I don't want to cause any injury on that second day. So the first of the 2 days you would do the heavy stuff, the second of the 2 days you do more of your detailed work. But that's tip number 1, is to boost a lagging body part, train it on back-to-back days. Tip number 2 is when you're doing a workout such as today, I actually paired together 2 very similar movements. I did a chest supported row and a cable seated row. I'm really wanting to grow my upper back. Kind of like from rear delt to rear delt across the upper back. I really want that to grow. So not only am I supersetting back on back-to-back days, I'm supersetting the back exercises. So 2 competitive movements are back-to-back, and that again just helps further muscle damage. It does take away a little bit of how heavy you can go on each movement, but I'm not training for strength, I'm training for muscle growth. So I do want each movement to be heavy enough, but if I lose a few reps on the top set or 5 pounds, but I'm still able to move enough weight to cause muscle damage, it's worth the trade-off. I'm going to get more muscle damage, maybe a little less strength progression, but it's helpful to get that boost in muscle growth. So this is again something I might do for short periods of time, 4 to 8 weeks, but it's a good way to pair together movements to create more muscle damage. And then the third tip is tip number 2, if you do movements back to back, is to pair the warm-ups for each movement back and forth, but then to do the working sets separate from each other. So in my workout today, of the 2 movements I did, the chest supported row is harder for me than a cable seated row. So I warmed them up going back and forth, but when I got to the working sets, I did all of my working sets of the chest supported row first, then all of my working sets of the seated row second. That's a great way to get, again, that joining together of similar movements, having them be back to back, but it helps you increase the weight load. If I were to do the row followed by the chest supported row followed by the seated row and then do that back to back in my working sets, I'll do that from time to time. I might do that for short bursts, 4 to 8 weeks, and then maybe I'll separate the working sets, keep the warm-up sets back to back. It's a great way to get more volume in a shorter period of time anyhow. But I might do 4 to 8 weeks where I'll separate the working sets, and then I'll go 4 to 8 weeks and maybe have these movements be separated by an entirely different movement, such as lat pull downs, pull-ups, anything that's more lat focused rather than upper back focused. And that separates the 2 movements, and it can actually help increase the weight load you can use on each movement, since similar movement patterns aren't done back to back. So this is kind of conceptual layering when you're thinking about how to structure your workouts, but it's a great way to maximize muscle damage, minimize joint stress, minimize injury risk, and actually maximize how much volume you can get in your training as well. So it's kind of a best of all worlds. And it is important, though, to fluctuate through these, so that way you do have time periods where you're focusing on heaviness and wanting to build your strength, because long-term success in muscle growth does require strength increase. So these are techniques you can play with from time to time, but it's good to always be kind of revolving these tactics rather than trying to pick one and just stay with it forever. There are usually pros and cons that can be offset by cycling these concepts. So I thought that was fun to share. If you like this kind of stuff, you can check out our daily podcast. We have over 2,000 episodes that covers nutrition, training, mindset, and listener Q&A. You can find the podcast on all popular podcast platforms, but also on our website. And if you go to our website, on the bottom of the homepage, you can actually submit a topic request for the podcast. If you ask for anything, I'll make a podcast for you for free. That's the whole point of the podcast, is just to help people and answer their questions. So check out the podcast, try these tactics, and thank you for watching.